First of all, just to introduce myself, so my name is Louise Jones. My role at Brightside is Learning and Development Manager. I'm going to be facilitating today's webinar, which is actually the second in our recent webinar series around delivering outreach online and digital outreach. So lots of you may have attended the first one we ran, which was last week, where we had a staggering number of people attend. There was kind of over 450 people. And the aim of this one is to kind of break down into smaller themes and get slightly smaller groups of people together to actually talk about the practicalities of running different outreach programs online. So thank you all so much for coming. We do, again, have loads of people. I think we're up to 68 people have joined today. We might even get a few more. So it's an amazing network of people to bring together, and hopefully you will get a lot of benefits from kind of being involved in this space and in this conversation. So hopefully you can all see my slides. I'm going to move on to the first one, which is just a bit of webinar etiquette. So you will have noticed when you arrived that you're automatically muted when you join the session. That is because we've got almost 70 of you on here. So if everyone's got their microphone and everyone's working from home, it's a bit mad in terms of background noise and stuff. So while we're in the main session, I would ask you to keep your microphones on mute, or your phones, just so that everyone can hear. It's probably also worth saying, please, if you have it on, I can't see videos and stuff at the moment, but if you do have it on, please turn it off. It helps to keep the connection when there's this many people on a webinar. And then finally, please do use the chat box to make comments or ask questions during the session. We'll try and field those as best we can. A couple of things to highlight. My colleague Chris, so I think he's labelled as Chris Brightside, on the chat, you can send a direct message to him if you need tech support. So if it seems as though your audio is not working, or you start to have any technical issues, then please do message Chris in the chat box, and he will do his best to help you. And then just generally, kind of as we go through and sort of in the main presentations, I would suggest maybe if you have questions as we go through, just pop those in the chat box as well. And then another colleague, Milena, will try and sort of field those, collate them, so that when we have pauses for questions, she can sort of feed back. We probably won't get to answer every question that comes up from this many people, so we will make sure we do some follow-up. We'll be able to save all the content of the chat box and use that to identify if there are further questions we want to answer later, and as well as kind of sharing with you kind of what were the key points or the key takeaways that we want to give you kind of going forwards to think about. So I think that's it on the webinar. So the other thing to say is please do join the conversation on social media. We've got the same hashtag that we've been using over the last week, and we were using in the webinar last week, which is hashtag digital outreach. So if you do have Twitter and things like that, please do post things, post your ideas, post your comments as you go forwards, and you're making your own plans and delivering your own activities. We would love to hear about that. So please do join the conversation online. Okay, so on to the purpose of today's webinar. To those of you that did join last week, that was sort of our introduction. We were talking about digital outreach generally. We had almost 500 people join, and that was really this first step in trying to build a bit of a network around practitioners who are now looking to operate in this space, and kind of thinking about how you can move your programs online and what you can do online. So today we are focusing on one key theme, which did come up from a lot of people's comments last week, was around summer schools. Obviously this time of year is crucial for summer school plans. Some people I know have had to cancel summer schools. Some people are having to think creatively and willing to think creatively on what you can offer instead. So that's the focus of today's session. And it was really important to us when we were putting this webinar together, was that we would find some time for you to ask each other questions, for you to discuss ideas with each other, rather than just have a series of presentations without much interaction. So that is what we are hoping to do today, so that you can access that support from your peers, you can share learning with a wider group than just the main speakers, and hopefully leave the session with some ideas yourselves for how you might look to put summer schools or elements of summer schools online. In terms of an agenda, this is what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start with two brief presentations. So myself and my colleague Sophie, who is one of our project managers here at Brightside. Sophie works with lots of our university partners and has worked with partners around summer schools and adding online elements to summer schools. So we're going to talk a little bit about Brightside's approach to project design around the idea of summer schools and what that could look like. And we are also delighted to be joined by Dr. Andrew Ross from the University of Bath, who is going to be presenting as well today around what they do. They already have a kind of a tried and tested model that runs online. So it will be really good to hear from Andrew about kind of how they've approached it and where they've seen success. We will have, hopefully, some time, a bit of time for you to ask questions based on those two presentations, and then we will move into breakout discussions. So I think this was on your email around joining the webinar. We're trying out the breakout room functionality on Zoom. We don't know how it's going to work with this many people, but we did a bit of testing and it felt like the best way to give you that chance to properly speak to each other rather than have to be silent on a chat of 70+ people. So we will move into breakout discussions before we come back to the main session. We'll do a bit of quick feedback before we sort of summarize and suggest some next steps. So I think that's it in terms of an intro. So we will start with the presentation I mentioned from us at Brightside. And Sophie and I are going to spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about Brightside's experience in adding on online elements to summer school design. And how we are approaching project design in this new world, in this new era with our partners. Lots and lots of our university partners run summer schools. They might not have used Brightside before, but we're having lots of conversations about how we can creatively work together to make an online offer for those summer schools. So I'm going to first of all hand over to Sophie to talk briefly about our previous summer school projects and kind of how we've worked with university partners before.
Great, well, hi everyone, nice to speak to you all. So first of all, a bit about what we've previously done in perhaps more normal circumstances than this year. We worked with several of our university partners adding mentoring as an addition to their summer school programme, and we've done this for several years, probably most of our partners, probably 5+ years now. So this traditionally is a support in year 13 following a classic year 12 summer school. So how this tends to work is after the 5 or so day residential, mentoring is offered as an add-on and a follow-on, and it's most often optional. This can really vary in timelines across our partners. Some have gone from sort of July to April, perhaps January. Others might have a little break in August and pick things up in September and run till November, and others go for a whole year program, July to July, of mentoring. Most of these programs use our one-to-one match function, so that's normally a student ambassador acting as their mentor, quite often someone they met at summer school. And some ambassadors have had sort of up to 12 matches, so 12 different mentees, but the variety of the match ratio has really varied depending on our partners. Most of the time matching is done based on subject, interest and hobbies, so it really mirrors the sort of faculty angle of summer schools, so such as humanities or STEM summer school. Pretty much every partner we work with has a similar aim for their addition of mentoring. Always tends to be supporting personal statements, so you know that crux time of year 13, for having someone to talk to, someone to read your application. Massively about student life, so accommodation, student finance, socialising, societies. You know, the biggest question every year 13 has is, how am I going to make friends? And there's also a bit of revision and study support of year 13 as well. Often there's a peer support angle, so the mentors have a group chat on our platforms, they can help each other, chip in. And we've also actually run perhaps a less traditional summer school with businesses. So we've put Allen and Overy on here on the slide. So they are a law firm, and following their week-long work experience in summer, we run mentoring, which is their Smarter Futures programme. But very similar to the more traditional university programs, this focuses on application support and also that year 13 support. Throughout the years we've done this, we've really found that linking mentoring with a summer school has resulted in good engagement, shown by the stats on the slide, and also has a strong impact on behavioural and capital outcomes, such as human capital, so knowledge gain, new information, and also growth mindset, social capital, hope, and self-efficacy. So through our experience in perhaps the more normal years we've been working, we have certainly found that online adds to summer school experiences and that students enjoy using online to follow on that support after their summer school.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. So as Sophie just outlined, we've worked with partners to offer those online follow-ups and kind of tagging on or linking with summer school interventions. But more generally, all of our work over the last 17 years, as long as Brightside's been around, has involved supporting young people online, giving them access to role models, giving them access to trusted information, and just generally taking a structured approach to programs. So even though kind of our summer school offer may be kind of a follow-on mentoring offer, but actually every project that we run at Brightside has involved these things, whether that's mentoring, whether it's a group challenge that school students work on together, whether it's an academic curiosity project where they have like forum conversation and showcases. We've done all of that with our technology. So when we were approaching this current challenge of how can we work best with our university partners and how can we add value through our experience, that's all the stuff that we've been trying to draw on, really. We know that the platform offers a range of functionality that we can use in different ways. We've tried and tested those in other contexts, and so now we kind of feel like we can apply that to the summer school context to come up with some ideas of what a summer school could look like using the Brightside platform, for example. So our platform has everything in one place. We know that it's accessed securely. You know, there's safeguarding controls kind of across the whole site. We've got an app. The communication is built in a flexible way. So it means that, you know, where a summer school, you have to be there and you have to be in a session and it has to be live. There are online alternatives to that, but equally, there are some opportunities through it not being live. And, you know, at the moment, we're hearing a lot from people around access, young people's access to the internet, for example, and what if they have to compete with, you know, siblings and parents for time on the computer at home and that kind of thing. And so for us at Brightside, having that flexibility in how young people engage with the intervention when it's online is really important to make sure that it is still inclusive for lots of different young people from different backgrounds and different situations at home. So I thought for those of you that don't know Brightside or haven't seen our platform, it would be useful to give you a bit of context by showing you what that kind of stuff looks like. So I'm going to show you some quick screenshots of what we think kind of functionality wise we can pull together to offer a young person a good experience of an online summer school. So the first one is our landing page, and so that's what you see when you first log in as a student or a young person. And we can use this to tie things together. So that's totally customizable. You can edit that. You can host videos there. You can put timetables on content and links there. So it's kind of a way to draw attention and I guess give them that sense of I'm part of something and I've logged in and this is all the stuff that's available to me. The second thing to highlight is the channel. So this is what our communication looks like on the Brightside platform. And that's what the bulk of our projects use, of course. We are an online mentoring organization and lots of our projects use online mentoring, and they do so predominantly through this one-to-one communication channel. But we do have group chats which display kind of like this as well, and you have access to a project lead there as well. So again, you have anyone that you're matched with for a one-to-one conversation or to get in touch with a coordinator, for example. You've got all of that available through the messaging functionality. The second screenshot in there is just what it looks like on a mobile, because it feels really important to Brightside that we promote when we are running programs at this time for young people that we're getting them to download the app. That means that they can compose messages offline, which of course, if they don't have access to the internet readily and consistently, that can be really helpful. And then the message is sent kind of once a connection is received. So there is that flexibility through the app as well. Even though there is that flexibility, we do have partners. Any of you who were on the webinar last week will remember we had a presentation from Target Medicine at UCL, who've actually tried a live messaging system where they had live moderation, which meant that they could have that kind of real-time conversation as well. So I guess that speaks to sort of the flexibility that we've tried to build in to our project design and to our development on the platform. We've got a few options in terms of content, which we want to think about in terms of summer schools. So we can host materials, videos, links, and things like that all in one place. But at the same time, we do have activity functionality, which means that we can potentially host a video with them some follow-up questions or some ideas for discussion. And that can just encourage reflection and hopefully engagement with content rather than just having content that kind of sits there and is static. We also have our communities functionality, which facilitates sort of forum style discussion. And we know that can work for, again, engagement with particular subjects. So we had a project that we ran a couple of years ago with Nottingham Trent University, which was around academic curiosity, and it was engaging with kind of subject content and then discussing it with people via this community. And then we also have an interesting model with SOAS, University of London, where they use the communities functionality to develop that kind of sense of belonging and encourage participants and young people taking part in the programme to talk to each other and get to know people beyond their one-to-one match. So that's quite an interesting sort of area that we can think about in terms of summer school and what's missing if you're not bringing them all together face to face. And then the final thing I wanted to show was our Ask the Expert feature, which is a way to facilitate more sort of traditional Q&A in a group setting. So you might have it at a summer school where you have somebody standing at the front giving a presentation, and then they get a bunch of questions. We can feature a profile, and then we can open up for questions so that anyone who's got an account on the site can submit a question, and then they get answered and published. So again, it's slightly more flexible. It doesn't require everyone to be online at the same time, but it does facilitate that more of that traditional question and answer style communication. So with all of that previous project learning and functionality in mind, that was sort of our starting point, kind of what do we have, where's our expertise, and what does our platform offer us? And then how can we work on building a number of building blocks that we can take and discuss with partners and hopefully put together then some more bespoke summer school offers for people that are interested. We've particularly tried to take an outcomes-led approach to when we're discussing summer schools, which feels really important when we're thinking about translating face-to-face activity online. You know, what was the intended impact of that? So if we have, for example, an interaction with a student ambassador at a summer school, what do we hope young people are getting from that interaction? And then how can we achieve that same outcome in a different way? And it feels like starting with that outcome is kind of one of the most important things to do to help you decide kind of what you deliver and how. So yes, we've basically taken that outcome and then thought, how else can we do it? So the first example is this interaction with a student ambassador. And we came up with, thinking about our technology, we came up with 5 different ways that you could facilitate a student having an interaction with a student ambassador. It might be a direct match using the messaging channel. It might be a community thread, so it's forum style discussion. It could be a group chat, so it's small groups rather than everyone. It could be that Ask the Expert. So there are a number of options. And the other thing that we've tried to think about, which is point number 3 on here, is what are the opportunities by going online? So what might you not be able to do in a face-to-face setting that you now can do if you're putting it online? So number 5 on here is, well, could you offer that interaction with a student ambassador on an ongoing basis as a follow-up to the summer school, which kind of comes back to what Sophie was saying earlier, where we've seen success in that kind of project. Could it be that actually you match them with a student ambassador throughout the summer school period? So there's not just one session where they get to engage with an ambassador, but actually they have an ambassador to sort of support them through the summer school experience when they're physically experiencing it on their own. So that was quite exciting for us to think about kind of what are the other opportunities as well as replacing face-to-face activity with an online option. This next slide is just a second example from that project design sort of building blocks list that we've come up with at Brightside. It's a taster lecture. You know, you could just say, great, well, we can do those lectures via webinar. And you can, that's great. You can signpost through the landing page. You can tell people when those webinars are happening. But actually, is there a benefit on hosting those on the platform so that the students that didn't make it to that live session, they haven't missed it. They can watch it online. They can then talk about it via communities, or they can reflect on it via an activity. So it was, that exercise was sort of how we went about thinking about what our technology can offer when we're thinking about designing summer schools online. So I'm very conscious of time, so we didn't want to take too much longer, but before handing over to Andrew, I thought it was worth highlighting kind of the key learning that we've done so far through our process of designing appropriate options for summer schools using our technology. The first one is that outcomes-led approach that I mentioned. So we should be being tied to the outcome for those young people rather than the method of how we achieve that outcome. So if we want them to feel more confident about seeing themselves at university, how can we do that? It might be a completely different method to if you've been doing it face-to-face. Flexibility feels really key. Yes, of course, in how students can engage with the technology, but also in terms of your timescales, in terms of the commitment that they need. If you normally have a 4-day summer school where students are there all day, every day, we're in a very different situation now. So how do we need to perhaps lengthen programs? How do we need to be more realistic with the commitment we're asking of the young people? Looking for opportunities, which is a really exciting part of this, I think. You know, how can we make non-live opportunities available for students as part of this? How can we provide mentoring support for them as part of this? From Brightside's perspective, those are really valid questions to ask. And then finally, the consideration of the whole experience is something that's kind of really stood out to me as I've been having these conversations, because there are lots of different options for how you can put something online. There's lots of platforms that deliver different things. You can have webinars, you can have mentoring, you can have Q&A. And what we need to consider is the whole experience from when that young person first engages with the summer school to when they finish. Do we want them to have had to log in to 4 different things and go to 3 different websites and try and keep track of where they should be at what time? Is there a way that we can kind of bring it all together and kind of have almost like a hub, I guess, that oversees and takes them through the experience? So those were sort of the key things that we at Brightside have been thinking about. And I mentioned we'll have some time for questions after Andrew's presentation. So happy to elaborate on any of that if you would like me to. So I'm going to hand straight over to Andrew, who is going to talk about his experience at Bath. And Andrew, if you just let me know when you want the slides to be moved on, I will try and do that.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. So I'm Andrew Ross. I'm the head of widening access and participation at the University of Bath. I'm going to start off with, we are not experts in this. We've never run a summer school online, but we have run online programs that were going to have physical engagements as well, but we're now moving those physical engagements online. So if we can move on to the first slide. So I thought I'd start off with a little bit about me. So I'm a chemist by trade. I did a degree and PhD in Sheffield in chemistry, got into outreach and moved into the widening participation sector just as sort of widening participation was kicking off in 2012-13. And I started at Bath in January 2013. I've been involved in pretty much every project that Bath has done over that time. And over the years, I've sort of moved up and around the different roles, and obviously now head of the team. About 18 months ago or so, we took one of our physical programs. So we, like many other universities, have sort of access to the university kind of program, which is for year 12 and 13 students, engaging them over a prolonged period of time with skill development, with knowledge, with building peer groups and all those sort of things. We had that for local schools for a few years, and we 18 months ago took that online. And a lot of the learnings from that are what informed this presentation, really, what informed us and what will inform us with our summer schools. Alongside us putting all of our summer schools online, we're also building lots of other online and digital engagement. So we built a resource hub, which we see as a starting point of our sort of engagement with schools and teachers and students and things in a digital sphere. We very much see that at the beginning and definitely not the end of our engagement. If we can go on to the next slide. So we, like Brightside, started with what are summer schools for? And if we start with that, then we can start to identify the ways in which we can deliver content, rather than going, we deliver this lecture, therefore we should just duplicate it online. So these are the key things that I pulled out when I was pulling this presentation together. There might be other things as well that other people might consider are important as part of summer schools, but for us, one of the biggest things that summer schools are there for to build those relationships. So they build relationships with peers across other schools and people that they may end up starting university with. There's obviously ambassadors as current students and understanding that student experience. And then there's the engagement with our academic staff and understanding what learning at the university would be like. Second thing is belonging and feeling like they would fit in at a university, or particularly our university. So some of that comes alongside engaging with our current students, engaging with our academics, but there's the obvious thing that we can't do online, which is the feeling of sense when you're at the university and that feeling of place. There's the building of knowledge. So there's us imparting knowledge upon the students. So the standard IAG kind of talks that we will all do. And then the secondary thing of, well, not secondary, but the other thing of skill development. So making sure that students are prepared, have the basic skills to be able to succeed if and when they choose to go to university. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. So these are the sort of things that we began to consider a few weeks ago when we decided we were going to move our summer schools online. And these are the things that we considered as we were moving our SUSTAIN program online as well. So there's a difference between replicating and replacing. I would be very wary, and we are not going to just duplicate an online summer school. So we're not just going to have a week of webinars where we would expect students to be at the first webinar at 9 o'clock and the last one at 5 o'clock. Louise mentioned it before, this whole access to computers and technology and all that sort of things. And the students that we are wanting to engage with this sort of things are the ones that are less likely to have access readily to that sort of equipment. So rather than replicating, we're replacing. So we have gone back to those skills, those key aims and objectives, and we're going to identify the ways in which we can replace that knowledge giving, or the ways in which we can replace that experience, rather than trying to duplicate it online. Comes on to the second thing, don't just deliver what you would normally online. Those things that we would do in person don't necessarily work online. If we just sat here and did an hour-long lecture, students would switch off. I know I switch off. I've been on a number of webinars over the past few weeks, and I have a good concentration span and I try my very best, but over a certain time you start to disengage because you're just listening. You're not having that engagement. So we need to consider the way in which we deliver things and not just duplicate. That third point, I guess I've really already covered, is that key things that you need to get across to students. So it's that identifying the aims of a summer school and making sure that you are coming up with ways of delivering that content that meets those aims. Again, Louise mentioned it, that building a program and that sense of belonging, that sense of being part of something. If you've just got a number of web pages where people can go and watch a video, they could do that anyway. This sort of summer school, these things become a program that in an ideal world they feel part of, and that's that building that sense of belonging as much as we possibly can. Ambassadors, as we all know, they are key to pretty much all of our programs that we run. We need to make sure that they're well selected and that they're heavily involved in all of this, because they are the ones that give the true sense of what the university is like. And I say selected well in that just because somebody is good at giving a tour around the university or a talk in person doesn't mean that necessarily they'll be very good at engaging online, or the opposite is true. Somebody who might not be very good at standing in front of a cohort of 50 students might be really good at engaging with small groups online. So we just have to consider that when we're selecting our students to be involved in these sorts of programs. Okay, next slide. The method of delivery. So again, it comes into that program idea, but we've had a number of, we started our online program, I say about 18 months ago. We started with our virtual learning environment, which happens to be Moodle. It's our system that we use for our current students. We have had over those 18 months a number of issues, things like non-university students being challenging to get non-university students onto the VLE in the first place. The VLE not really being designed for distance teaching. It's more of a sort of an addition to in-person teaching. So a lot of our academics use our virtual learning environment to share documents or run quizzes and things like that. They don't necessarily teach distance learning through our VLE. So we have actually moved away from our VLE and we've moved into Microsoft Teams, which I'm sure many of the colleagues across this presentation and other universities as well have begun to use. That has allowed us to build a cohort that can engage with each other. We can create teams of students so that they can be separated out and they can work in a small team, they can collaborate and they can work together on things as well. I say there, a library of videos is not enough. I have engaged with a number of digital versions of physical events, like virtual open days, which end up being slightly smartened up web pages, which are just videos and links. And I always find that really disappointing. And I think that a program that is replacing a summer school needs to be a lot more than that. It needs to be a lot more engaging and needs to make the students feel like they're part of something. I've said that point there a million times, I'm not going to repeat it. What works online, what works in person doesn't always work online. We do need to think about our students that are taking part in their other commitments. It's really unlikely that a school would be very happy with us taking the student away from their schoolwork for an entire week. In the past, when things were slightly more normal, that may have been okay. I think with limited teaching capacity, limited content time that teachers have been able to give their students, it's really important that they focus on their schoolwork. So we need to make sure that whatever we build and whatever we replace summer schools with works around all of their other commitments and considers things like their access to IT and that sort of stuff. Final and possibly the most important thing, safeguarding, as always, thinking about how you update your policies. We're in the process of this at the moment to ensure that all of the digital content and the digital ways of engaging are covered as part of your safeguarding processes. I know before we started delivering online, we had very little in our safeguarding policies about digital, other than the sort of social media element. We've had to update ours quite a lot over the past 12 months or so to ensure that the ways in which we deliver are covered by our safeguarding policy. Okay, next slide. So I thought I'd give you a brief overview of what we've done. So I've given you all of the sort of context of the thought processes we've been through. So this is our summer school program. We call it Discover Bath. Last year, it was a week in terms of a summer school. We had 4 hours of pre-work, which was delivered online through email. We sent out some read these kind of things or answer these kind of questions so that when the students arrived, they were prepared and had some content knowledge. They then came to the university for a week, and then they had 6 hours-ish of work afterwards, which was analysing data or writing up the work that they'd done, which then allowed them to write a report, which was submitted to the university, moderated by our academic staff, and if they achieved the right level, they got an alternative offer. So obviously during that summer school week, we did what most universities will do. They were doing some taster sessions, they were doing taster lectures, they were doing some project work, which was an experience of that first year study. And obviously one of the most valued things that students like is that social time with their peers and with the ambassadors, where they really get to get that feel of the university. Okay, if we can click. So this year, we've cancelled the in-person week, so we're not running the summer school in person. So we've changed the way in which we're going to deliver the program. So we're going to keep it as a program, but it's going to be spread over 8 weeks rather than just over a week. So they'll get about the same amount of content. We're going to deliver it through Microsoft Teams so that we can build a cohort of students. We can build a cohort of students that are delivering one particular subject. And then we can then split that group out into smaller groups, and they can have different channels where you can have a team of 3 students all working on one project together. And then we can have an ambassador working with them. 2 things, one is safeguarding and the other one is then supporting them to be able to do their little projects. We're going to guide their project over those 8 weeks. So we'll release that content on a weekly-ish basis. And each week will be a new task. So it might be, let's think about how we do research. Let's think about how we might do a literature review, how we might start to plan a piece of research. And each week we'll have some guided videos and some guided content alongside our ambassadors to ensure that the students are progressing along that process. At the end of that, they will have achieved the same thing that they would have done last year. So they'll be able to write up their report, hand it in, moderated by our academic staff, and they should be able to get an alternative offer out at the end. So we're not trying to replicate what we would do in person. We are doing something different, but that achieves the same aims, where we're trying to engage the students, give them space for collaboration, give them space to deliver their skills and build their skills, but through an online medium. So I thought I'd just reflect back on the next slide. So these were the points that I made at the very beginning. So the sort of key things of what I think summer schools are for. So if we click, so this is what I think the activities that we did last year that address some of those things. So obviously building relationships with peers, they've got all that free time. Ambassadors, they're building relationships with ambassadors while they're in their sessions, getting support through their activities in the free time. Our academics are delivering, and I've put in their long sessions, meaning sort of 45 minutes or an hour, which in person doesn't seem very long, but online would be. That sense of belonging is built through being on campus and engaging with the activities and the surroundings of the university. The knowledge gained through our talks, through chats with ambassadors, and all the standard things that we would do as part of a summer school. And then the skills is taking part in those activities, doing the taste of things, all of those things that I'm sure everybody does. So, and then online, this is sort of how we're trying to replace those things. So building in chat spaces for the peers to be able to chat to each other. Our ambassadors will be managing those chat groups, managing those small groups, managing larger groups, being there to answer questions. We're starting a lot of that engagement with peers and ambassadors before the academic content starts being delivered as well. So they should start to get to know each other a little bit before we start bombarding them with, right, this week we would like you to do this, and next week we would like you to do that. Our academics will hopefully, depending on how life takes us over the next few months, we'll be preparing short videos, sort of taster lectures, maybe splitting up some of the content that they would normally deliver, but splitting it up into shorter chunks. They'll also be guiding the study of the students, so that we're not just letting them off just to say, hey, go off and do this on your own project on your own. We will run some live Q&A sessions, but there'll be opportunities for others that can't attend the live Q&A to ask questions as they go. That belonging thing is the hardest thing to replicate online, because they're not on campus. So there's things that I'm sure all universities have, that sort of video content, the 360 images, the student stories, all of those sort of things will package up in a nice, engageable way so that students can have at least a little sense of what the university is like. And we will, in the future, invite them to the campus so that they can actually see what it's like, assuming we're ever allowed out of our house in the future. The knowledge and the skills, again, it's all videos, it's all chats, it's all about guiding the students through the process so that we're not just dumping them in. We're very much taking it step by step and leading them through that process. So hopefully they feel completely supported and part of a program, but knowing where they can get support and help as well. once the students have handed in their projects and things, we also do all of the things that I imagine most universities do, and the sort of things that Louise was talking about before, supporting things like personal statements, chats with admissions tutors and all that sort of thing. That will also fit into this process. So we'll have those groups on the Teams, on Microsoft Teams, and we'll be then asking for them to submit their personal statements to Microsoft Teams, and we'll have teams of outreach staff, admissions staff, all checking those personal statements and giving directed feedback to the students. I think that was the last slide. It was, yeah, so there's some lovely marketing just to end it with. I think that's me done, so I'm happy to answer questions as we go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really, yeah, super fascinating. I'm sure it's given lots of people ideas and I'm sure questions. So we do have a couple of minutes. We might not have time to get through everyone's questions, but we will save the chat and we'll ask Andrew to maybe provide some kind of answers to any questions we don't get to today that we can send around as a follow-up. I know a few of you have been asking things via the chat box, which I believe Milena will have been keeping an eye on and hopefully noting down. So Milena, do you want to kind of feedback a couple of questions, and probably they're mostly for Andrew, but we can kind of see who they're most relevant for.
Sure. Thank you everyone for submitting questions. I've tried to gather them and kind of put them together so they're a bit easier to answer. So number one, I think there's been a few questions around safeguarding and how you use Microsoft Teams and Moodle to make sure that summer school students are safe. And if you could just elaborate on that, Dr. Andrew, that would be really great.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, please do just call me Andrew, it's fine. So safeguarding is a big issue, and it's something we've been grappling with over the last 12 months as the programs have developed. There are always things that you don't always consider at the beginning that come up. So in terms of using Microsoft Teams, we use students' school email addresses. So we'll only add students with their school email addresses onto Microsoft Teams. We can add them as guests into a certain team. There are at least 3, so there's at least 2 student ambassadors who are all DBS checked, and at least 1 member of staff who is also in every single team. Students sign a code of conduct effectively that lays out how they will and won't use the Teams. We don't do any one-to-one video calls. There's one-to-one chats, but no one-to-one video calls. The one-to-many video calls are all recorded. And then our staff will pick some at random and go through them afterwards and identify any issues that need to be dealt with, and they'll be dealt with post the situation. The teams are private teams and are locked down, so only those that are invited can get onto them, and where we can is to block live calls between students and things. I think that's about it off the top of my head, but we are, yeah, say always updating our safeguarding policy, so I'm sure there are other things that will come up over the next few weeks and months.
Great, thanks. So we've got another question that's kind of come up a few times as well about building that sense of belonging, and I think Louise, you also touched on this. So as we've said, like creating that sense of belonging is often difficult online and through like the digital world. Do you have any advice for how to do this? And is it just down to marketing? Is it just down to how you launch the summer school? What is your advice on creating that sense of belonging? And what does maybe that sense of belonging actually even mean?
Oh, okay. That's a big question.
Yeah.
Sense of belonging, I guess, is students understanding what the university is, what it's like, what it feels like. There's sometimes that intangible feeling about a place, and you don't know whether you get that feeling until you're actually there. And we can't replicate that online, and we just have to accept that we can't. What we can do is try and build that sense of the feeling of the place. So it comes through student stories, it comes through videos, it comes through images, and it comes through that sort of experiential type of placement of stuff. So I guess it's building the content. The content is the most important thing, and it's making sure that that content is in an easy and sensible process, in a sensible way. So not just having, here's 27 links to 27 pictures of the university, but maybe more making it so that students can navigate through the thing. So there's a campus tour video, and then off after that, here's a selection of areas where you might want to look into more. Here's the 360 views of the accommodation or whatever it is. So it's about building as much as you can around, I guess, trying to replicate that campus tour kind of feeling, but online. Some universities I know have gone for virtual open days, so there might be some content there through the virtual open days that can be used. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do through virtual open days as well, is build that sense of belonging and that sense of what the university is like. Not sure if that...
Can I just add something to that? I was going to say, I think there's some creative ways of thinking about your ambassadors as well in that scenario, because I completely agree that kind of the physical sense of place and kind of what the campus is like and how it feels when you're standing there and looking at that it is something that's very difficult. But I think there's quite a lot of students who struggle to see themselves somewhere. You know, like you said, student stories are really important, and I think if you're giving young people the opportunity, ideally on a one-to-one, to ask the questions, and if your ambassadors are trained to encourage discussion around, can you see yourself here, and if you can't, what are the challenges, what are the barriers, why do you think that? If they're trained to ask those open questions and encourage that self-reflection, I think you can deliver some sense of belonging through your ambassadors sharing their experiences and sharing the challenge that they had when they arrived, when they felt like they didn't belong, and how they overcame that. So almost like helping young people to think ahead to, okay, if I did arrive and I felt like that, how would I deal with it? And they've kind of thought about that in advance, and I think that kind of stuff can help contribute to the belonging question as well.
I think that honesty thing is key. Actually, we tend to brush over all the negatives, and we go, oh, wasn't it a great experience? Oh, I had a fantastic time. When actually being honest about things and how you overcome stuff is some of the most useful information that can be given.
Yeah. Can we, I know there are lots of questions still coming in. Milena, can you pick your one, maybe one that's come up a lot, or the one you think is the best question? And then we will definitely make sure we collate the rest and make sure that we address them as a follow-up, and at least signpost to kind of share contact details and things so that you can continue these discussions.
Yeah, as you said, Louise, there's a lot of questions, and we will follow up with as many as possible and pass them on to Andrew if there's any specifically for him. I guess for one final question, that's hopefully a short one, or maybe not. What informed your decision to run the program for the amount of time that you did, so for 2 hours a week over 8 weeks, rather than through the summer holidays? I mean, just what was your rationale in general for designing it in the way that you did?
Yeah. That's a good question. So last year we ran a week we actually ran 3 weeks of summer schools, but students experienced a week basically within the last 3 weeks of term. We didn't want to just take a week of time and deliver it over a week. We're considering the students' other commitments. So I wanted to try and keep it a minimum amount of commitment each week, but still replicate the amount of time and engagement that they would have had if they'd had an entire week at the university. So running it 8 weeks, 2 hours a week is that sort of happy medium, I think. And I think that sense of feeling like you belong to a program and you belong to something is better over a prolonged period of time, rather than just in one short burst over a few days. We could have potentially done less and more each week, but I say I'm just aware of the other commitments on students. And at the moment, we don't know what's going to happen over the summer. So we know, for example, that many schools have continued teaching over Easter. So there may be more teaching that happens into the summer holidays. We just don't know what's going to happen. So I think by keeping it a minimum engagement each week just allows for flexibility with the situation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think there was a note earlier about sharing slides, and so yeah, as part of the follow-up, we'll kind of make the slides that we've used available. So we're going to move into the sort of the pilot bit of the webinar where we try out some breakout rooms. And I guess it's worth saying, kind of, hopefully you've been able to keep an eye on everyone has been able to keep an eye on the chat box, because there are some questions that it might be that, you know, the 65 other people on the webinar will have useful kind of suggestions. I'm sure there are people who are trying out their own things using different programs and things like that. So do have those questions in mind as well. You know, ask them of your colleagues when you get into the breakout room. So just a couple of notes on how we hope that this will work. So I'm going to set up breakout rooms to take us to about 3:15, so hopefully we'll get a good 15 minutes of discussion. You will be randomly allocated to a room by Zoom, so I believe it will kind of come up with a bit of a pop-up. I haven't done it yet, so don't panic that it's not happened. It will come up and say kind of, you've been invited to join breakout room 1. So just accept that. Hopefully you will all quite smoothly move into the breakout rooms. There will be a small timer, so we'll set it for 15 minutes and it will count down. So hopefully during your discussion, you can keep an eye on the timer. And once you know you only have a few minutes left, kind of if you have a burning question for your colleagues that you want to get out, then you can. So the timer will bring you back. So if you can not leave, basically try and guard against closing down or leaving meetings, because it might end up you leaving the whole thing and then it's hard to get back in. You might have to completely rejoin. So hopefully it will happen quite automatically. Once the breakout session is ended, you'll be redirected back into, it looks like most of you made it. So thank you, and you'll have all been muted again now. So thanks for that. We will share an evaluation survey at the end, because I'm really interested to know how that breakout room thing worked. You know, was it useful? Was it not long enough, too long, that kind of stuff. So please do at the end when we share it, take some time to feed back. So we've got just over 10 minutes till we're due to finish. We might finish early, we might have a bit more time for kind of general questions. But what I wanted to ask before I forget is that if you're in your breakout room, you did manage to capture any of the conversation, any of the ideas, or the majority of the chat happened via the chat box. I basically can't see that on the main chat, which we're going to save. So if the person who was writing that down, or a person from each group, could possibly just copy and paste from your own chat box the sort of the history from your breakout room and resend it, it will then come into the main chat and we can kind of access it later. So please don't worry if it's not very clear, or you're worried that it's all going to be a bit jumbled up. We can do some filtering, but it just felt like the best way of gathering people's notes. I can see a lot of it's coming through, so thank you very much for doing that. Don't worry if you haven't yet and you're just taking a bit of time over it, that's absolutely fine. What I wanted to suggest in terms of feedback, because we won't have time to sort of go to every group and have everyone's sort of takeaways and questions, was if there was a particular thing that you spent your time on, if there was a particular helpful idea that someone had that everyone in the room was like, that's amazing, or a question that you got completely stuck on. I think that's the kind of stuff that it would be really useful to share with the main group now over the next couple of minutes. And we have worked out that there's a raise hand functionality, which feels a bit like school, and I apologize for that. But again, just with over 50 people still with us, I think Sophie can demonstrate on the participant list, so where you see all the names listed, including yours, there should be a raise hand button. Sophie, do you want to try and hit yours and see what happens? Or any Brightsider, actually.
As co-host, we can't do it, so.
Oh, can't do it. Okay, well, let's try it. If you can, if anyone can see the raised hand and wants to give us some feedback. Oh, we've got loads. Okay, we'll just go from the top. Jan, you are first. I will unmute you.
I was just practicing raising my hand.
Oh, no problem.
but we started off by talking about safeguarding and then went on quite quickly to accessibility for widening access students and the limited IT access to IT and the space for it as well. And then that kind of led to us discussing maybe there's a need for maybe an app to be developed, because most young people do actually have smartphones. Well, in London in any case. So
yeah. Thank you, Jan. That's great. Yeah, it was actually a conversation that we were having at Brightside this morning, and kind of have it regularly, but we were saying, because the Sutton Trust have recently published some research around kind of access to devices for less advantaged students, and definitely things like computers, laptops, tablets. You know, we're trying to work with a group where a large proportion of them don't have access to something like that, whereas actually it probably means the majority of when they can get on the internet is on a smartphone. So I think it's a really valid consideration. And I guess when you are exploring different platforms, kind of definitely looking at how it displays on mobile, what is the accessibility for a mobile device? I know certainly at Brightside, since we launched our app, you know, we've been surprised at how many of our young people typically use the app to access it, even though it's a mobile responsive site, they're going through the app. So definitely, yeah, I agree, really important. Thank you, Jan. Sarah, you have your hand up, so let's come to you. I'll unmute you. Sarah Dymott.
Yeah, oh, hello. So things we were looking at was the actual duration of the summer school. The University of Bath is 8 weeks too long, but some of the group members felt that maybe that was too long a time. So maybe 2 to 3 weeks was a better length, as maybe you might lose young people over the duration of the programme. One discussion about safeguarding was about, do academics need to be DBS checked in terms of virtual content? I know I work at Arts University Bournemouth, and because the academics, because it's a practical subject, because it's arts based, the lecturers, they do have to be DBS checked, but obviously we're saying that perhaps student recruitment teams need to seek guidance from their HR teams at their specific universities. One question was about moderation is a concern. How does it work? You know, if students can access chats in between the sessions, you know, how does that work? Because obviously there might be conversations and there's nobody from the universities going in to monitor what those students are talking about. And kind of the last point was that some universities express financial concerns over the cost of platforms, because obviously their budgets might have been allocated for the year. They've not had the foresight, which a lot of us have seen, had the foresight to think that we needed to have this kind of resource easily, you know, to the team. So actually, where's that money going to come to when we need it, because it's already been allocated?
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, well, it sounds like you guys managed to cover quite a lot in what I thought the time ran down really quickly. So thank you for sharing the feedback. Yeah, some really good points, and yeah, that the cost one is a good point, and it's where it's helpful to have all of you from kind of similar backgrounds and institutions kind of talking together, because I'm sure that is a challenge in terms of budgets and things. A couple of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking around project length, because yes, certainly at Brightside, where everything we deliver is online and kind of always has been, that drop off of engagement is something you've definitely got to be aware of. And you know, Andrew had some really good tips around making it engaging and not just replicating what you do face to face and online. But you are still, it's probably likely to, you're going to need to expect some level of drop off. So I guess that has to inform like your structure and your content, like what do you put in the first 2 weeks where you're likely to have the majority engaged, you know, what's the most important stuff maybe, and kind of looking at front loading your program and things like that, maybe making some of the later parts like optional or follow on. So yeah, I think some really good, interesting implications for project design there. The question of safeguarding is coming up a lot. It was in the main session as well. And that question of moderating, if you have chats, if you have live chats versus if they can contact each other anytime. So you know, at Brightside, we're very happy to help sort of facilitate those conversations as a follow-up. So do get in touch if you want us to kind of explore who in the network that we know is doing something similar or using a similar platform to you, or if you want more information about how we at Brightside do things, we have kind of a moderation system for that reason. So yeah, I think it's safeguarding seems to be something that people will want to pick up elsewhere, and we're keen to just support with that and facilitate it where we can. I don't see any other hands up, but I think we've got time if anyone else has anything that was particularly interesting in their group discussion that they want to feed back. Okay. Oh, Sarah Adams. Yes, here we go. Unmute. Hi, Sarah. Oh, I can't unmute you. I wonder if you can do it yourself.
I'm unmuted.
Yes,
I've
perfect.
unmuted myself. Thank you. Not necessarily from the group discussions, but I did wonder if for certain summer schools and certain disciplines that you might look at, there's a lot of practical elements, and I don't know if anybody's had any successes or hints and tips or less successful attempts to translate these activities.
Can you elaborate on practical elements?
So I'm just thinking, if people are in, we've got things like engineering and medicine, if people are doing workshops, has anybody been brave enough yet to dip the toe in those waters?
Oh, good question. Andrew's raised his hand, so he might be able to respond to that. Let me, Andrew, yeah. Do you have a response to that question, Andrew?
That's exactly what we're doing. So we are predominantly science and engineering. We are, all of the summer schools will be project based. So they will be doing projects in their particular subject across the sciences and engineerings. So rather than them doing physical projects, they're going to be doing more online projects or more theoretical projects. We will wait to see how it works, but I think in the current climate, that's all we can do.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, Charlotte is coming in on that possibly as well. Charlotte, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Charlotte from BSMS, and we've just been given some money by Health Education England to run some medicine summer schools. And in terms of, I think a lot of the things that we're doing along sort of with patient history taking and some of the more discussion based, we're still going to try and facilitate online. Ours will all be sort of post 16, and we are, I feel like, might get a bit of not much agreement on this, but we're looking at using Zoom as our platform. Our kind of reasoning is that students will have conversations that we can't always moderate anyway if they were on a summer residential. So where possible, we'll obviously limit chats between we can afford and sort of retrospectively moderate. But we are looking to use Zoom to facilitate sort of small group discussions and do a lot of article skills, especially as a communication.
Thank you, Charlotte. You broke up a bit at the end. We got as far, you'd kind of explained you were looking to use Zoom and kind of how you were going to try and limit some of the functionality in terms of safeguarding. The last couple of sentences I think cut out. Can you repeat the end?
That's if I can remember what I said. I think we're just going to try and use some of a lot of the clinical skills based sessions where equipment isn't needed is very much safe. So we do communication sessions. We sort of talk about palliative care and death and taking a patient history, and we're going to try and use sort of the breakout rooms on Zoom to do that with mentors. We obviously are looking at numbers of students, and I don't know the numbers that people are trying to work with. Are they, because it's online, are they going to try and reach more students, or are they going to try and sort of pull it in and work with fewer work?
Yeah, good question. The size question is a good point. Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was really helpful, I'm sure, in relation to that question about practical activities. Okay, we've got just a minute now until 3:30, and some responses to your question around student numbers are going to come through the chat box, I think. So do feel free, keep those comments and kind of suggestions coming. I am going to wrap up though. So just to go on to, I don't know if you can can see my slide again, or whether it remained empty. But anyway, it was just to kind of reiterate the purpose of the session was to kind of bring people together for some peer support, shared learning, and hopefully come up with some ideas for how you can approach that running summer schools online. Certainly, I took a huge amount from Andrew's presentation, and it sounds like you had some very helpful discussions in the breakout room as well. I think Milena has posted a Typeform survey in the main chat box, so please do. I think it's like 2 or 3 questions. It's very minimal, but if you can fill it in, I'm particularly interested in how you found that breakout. You know, would you want more of that next time, that kind of thing, and how was it for you guys? So please do let us know your thoughts on the session. As a follow-up, we'll send around slides. We will peruse the chat box for kind of unanswered questions or things, and hopefully get Andrew's feedback on a bit of follow-up we can send regarding questions, and we will try and sort of summarize the notes that came through from the breakouts. We have got a series of webinars running. This was kind of the second in the series, the first of our kind of smaller ones. So if you search Brightside on Eventbrite, some of them may still have places. We'd love to see you. And I just wanted to finish, I guess, by reiterating, we would love to hear from you. You know, we are speaking to multiple partners, and we have 30+ higher education partners at Brightside who are keen to be learning from each other and hearing what you guys are doing. So please do get in touch, even if it's just a question that you want us to help you find the answer to from our network, or if there's things that we can help answer or explore, especially in terms of those safeguarding questions, then please do get in touch. We've got Nick's email on there, but for any Brightsider that you know, please do get in touch, and we're keen to continue those conversations. So do, yeah, let us know what you thought, share your ideas online, and thank you so much for contributing and staying around and feeding back at the end. I found that really helpful.